The purpose of this presentation is just to go over some general religious statistics in the US and in the world to put this module into context. So you can see that in the US, roughly 80% of the population identifies as Christian. You can see also a little less than 2% are Jewish, less than 1% Buddhist, a little more than 0.5% Muslim, and a little less than that Hindu. This leaves the large yellow wedge. That yellow wedge are those who call themselves unaffiliated. The yellow wedge in the first graph represents those who are unaffiliated. The wedge is broken down in the second graph. Secular on the second graph represents those of the unaffiliated who said that religion was mostly or completely unimportant in their lives. People who were secular. Religious on the second graph represents those of the unaffiliated who said that religion was moderately to very important in their lives, but they didn't identify with a particular religion. Here you can see this broken down in a different way. The important thing to note on this page is how the unaffiliated break down. Roughly 6.3% of the total population do not call themselves religious, 2.4% call themselves agnostic, and 1.6% atheists. To the right you can see how atheists and agnostics stack up against other non-Christian religious groups. Atheists and agnostics outweigh non-Christian religions in the US by a significant margin. In spite of this, atheists are the most hated minority group in the US. If you look at the first chart here, it shows how many people said atheists do not fit their vision of an American society. On the right, you can see how many said they least approve of their child marrying an atheist. Note also that even in 2003, not long after the 9/11 attack, atheists are still more hated than Muslims, who took a lot of criticism at that time. Some respondents associated atheism with illegal behavior like drug use and prostitution, that is to say with immoral people who threaten respectable community from the lower end of the social hierarchy. Others saw atheists as rampant materialist and cultural elitists who threaten common values from above, the ostentatious wealthy who make a lifestyle out of consumption, or the cultural elite who think they know better than everyone else. Below is a link to an article on the topic. Here are numerous rather shocking quotes said by famous people and groups about atheists. I'm not going to read them all here, but you should pause and read them. Can you imagine anybody in power saying anything similar to this about Jewish people or about Buddhists? Bush, for example, said that atheists should not even be considered citizens in the US. Can you imagine the uproar if somebody said that about Jewish people or Muslims? There would be a terrible uproar. But when this was said about atheists, it was largely not objected to in the press. But the United States is a bit unusual among major industrialized nations with first world education and technology. If you look at the breakdown here, you will see many countries have far more non-believers. The reason for the two colors of green is the high and low estimates. The total green is the high estimate, and the dark green alone is the low. So you'll see that France, Germany, Japan, Denmark, Sweden likely have populations that are more than half non-believers. This also helps debunk the idea that atheists cannot be moral, given that many of these other countries with much higher percentages of atheists have much less crime, especially violent crime, than we do here in the US. In spite of the fact that atheists are so hated in the US and many people assume that they are immoral, the evidence doesn't seem to bear this out. Some people argue that the fact that atheists are underrepresented in prisons show that religion is not necessary for morality and that atheists seem to do better than religious citizens at maintaining moral behavior. Others claim that data is skewed by inmates who would prefer to say that they are religious, though the polls are anonymous. Some claim that atheists often go through higher levels of education, while prison populations are largely inhabited by the poor, which may skew the numbers in the atheist favor. The arguments may continue, but as far as prison data is concerned, there does not seem to be any indication that atheists are less moral than religious citizens, since there is a much smaller percentage of them in prison than their numbers in the general population. Often it is claimed that Hitler was an atheist. While there certainly have been a number of despotic leaders who have been atheists, as well as men and women of varying faiths, the claim that Hitler was an atheist is so often repeated by so many people it deserved debunking here. These are just two of the many possible quotes illustrating the fact. I'm not going to read these quotes here, but if you pause and read them, you will clearly see their religious nature. Hitler was not an atheist, nor was the typical member of the Nazi Party. So, what was the point of all this? It was simply to put in perspective the debate over whether or not religion is necessary for ethics before going on to the other presentations. Until next time.